Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 live stream for the Arnold Invitational. Going to get you ready for all of those DFS lineups and any bets that you plan on placing. With a look at the weather report, we'll go through ownership to help you out with setting your exposure. We'll also go through some shots, gain metrics, building your player pool, and some course conditions and averages to help you out with your pick and props too. So whatever you're doing, hopefully you're having a fantastic week so far. Say hi in the chat if you haven't already, and don't be shy at all to let me know whatever you're curious about. That can be questions about players, strategy-based stuff, any bets to go through towards the second half of the live stream. All of that is fair play, and we'll go through all of that together. But we got Antonio in the chat with a question we'll go through on the prop side a little bit later on. But hopefully you're having a fantastic day, and cheers to everyone out there. We've got a tiny glass of whiskey over here that we'll be sipping on, and then waking up early tomorrow morning at about 6 a.m. to get up there to Bay Hill. We'll be on site tomorrow and on site for Sunday. So excited for all of that. So hopefully we can get a little sweat going, maybe a showdown takedown over the next day or two, and maybe even an outright sprinkle as well. But other than that, that's all I've got before we get this thing started. Without further ado, let's start off with some course conditions, which today played pretty much exactly what we called for. We thought the morning would be easier than the afternoon. And if you split it by the morning versus the afternoon, that's exactly what ended up happening. And it was about a 0.4 stroke difference between the two waves. I was hoping it might be a little closer to a 0.5 shot difference, but either way, you wanted guys starting earlier. The winds really kicked up on the last few hours. Also, the course did firm up a little bit, which was also to be expected. And it might not have been quite the one-shot difference from round 1, but we weren't expecting that. It wasn't going to be a 3 to 4 hour period of calm weather like what we had for Thursday, but still a bit of an edge to squeeze out. And I think it's important to note heading into Saturday because the weather forecast looks almost the exact same. So this is the HRRR that we have up for Dr. Phillips, which is where Bay Hill is. And although there's still some winds in the morning, it does look like towards the very beginning of the day that the winds aren't going to be as strong. And just based on how Florida weather works, it's why we did it for round 2. But the winds are almost always more consistent in the afternoon. And that combined with the course getting firmer and faster is why, once again, I think there's going to be about a half a stroke difference between the first and the second half. But because you do have your informed players, your better guys teeing off in the second half, it might not actually show up as a 0.5 shot difference. It might end up being closer to even from side to side. But when you account for the form and the better players teeing off later, the half a stroke difference is baked into that. So it might be pretty even across the board. But because we do need to get some low-owned guys in there into lineups, and it is 2 sums off of hole number 1, some of those earlier starters that just made it through the cut line are going to be half to sometimes even a third or a fourth of the ownership of the chalky guys around them, and they could be used to get some differentiation in there. So speaking of, let's go through the ownership next, which weather, always a big part of our process, but ownership and arguably an even bigger part of it than that. So we'll go through ownership, who the top 10 highest owned players are going to be. We'll catch up on chat, see who's down there, and then give you where the rest of the field is going. Because, of course, we need to know what the rest of the lineups are going to look like so that we can make some of those pivots and play against them. But we got a DK Millionaire in the chat. What's going on, dude? He said you seemingly have a pretty good lineup going. He said, is that too much to ask to have a good weekend? Seems like that's a good combination, man, but you've always going to have a lot go your way to take down a GPP. So best of luck to you, man. And honestly, man, those questions are, I hate to say they're brain dead, but they are, man. No one knows what's going to happen over the next 2 days in a contest with 30,000 people. But for your sake, I hope it works out. But yeah, man, asking me what's going to happen, there's nothing constructive I can give you, man. I don't know what you're asking for, frankly. What's going on, Hoobs? Welcome on in. We got Sites in the chat as well. You're sitting in first in the $3 5 max. There you go. And he's got a 5 of 6, so it's going to be a sweat. Yeah, I might not hold on, but I'm sure you'll still be in position to cash, so you got that. Smash the like button if you guys haven't already. We got Jay down there, Antonio with another question. And yeah, we'll go through the shots gain metrics on Ricky, but he's in prime position to have himself a weekend. Same thing with Harry Hall. You said he's letting the around the green and putting spike tomorrow. He's a spike putting guy, so I could see that happening. And you need some Akshay. Hey, best of luck. Hopefully it works out for you, my dude. Let's go through some ownership. So some constructive stuff that can actually give you information-wise, not, oh, how's my lineup looking after round 2? That's just nonsense. Top 10 highest owned players on here, of course, are from my Patreon page. Number 1's a Colin Morikawa, and this is going to have a lot of correlation with the leaderboard. The guys that are playing well are going to get some extra steam. Daniel Berger, even though he's a 7K range player, because he's playing so well over the Thursday and Friday, I've got him at 20% as well. So an Aubert, along with a Morikawa as the other stud up top, that I've got it over 20%. I've got a Scotty and a Rory just under 20% or about 20% with Scotty, just like yesterday. And they're playing decent enough golf that even at $12 and nearly $14,000, that people are going to use them. And I actually think that's a pretty sharp play with one of the two for tomorrow. And even though it is slightly prohibitive, there's not enough 9 and 8K range guys that I think you have to play that it makes them unplayable. Like there were 2 to 3 guys in that range that I thought were severely mispriced, that there would be a little bit more opportunity cost with using these guys, but that's not necessarily the case tomorrow. And Xander at -5, getting some steam, a Cam Young, a Russell Henley, a Goddard, and Akshay, all also relatively popular. And I guess it's worth noting that Akshay is the other 7K range guy that we've got as chalk, and it has to do with him being in second place through 36 holes. So these guys, a lot of you may have predicted we're coming into the slate as chalk. And just outside of that top 10, that next 10 in the ownership, that 10 to 20 range, has a lot of other 7K range and even a 6K range player that sneaks into there. Those guys are the ones that I'm especially fading in. Like even your Akshays or Daniel Bergers of the 7K range. If there's chalk that is the disgusting chalk that you're not really going to ever see me playing, it's 6 and 7K range chalk. Whereas, a Scotty or Rory, I wouldn't even consider chalk. They're just getting the ownership because they're world number 1 and 2 and because they're at the top end of the board. And even a Morikawa and an Aubert, they're a little chalky, we'd say, but they're not nasty, disgusting chalk that you couldn't touch at 22%. If your process is getting you onto those sort of plays because of their shots gained metrics, course fit, course history, Bermuda putting, you name it, right? If your process is getting you onto those players, you can still use them. Just know that you're not going to get as much out of them if they end up getting there. Somebody that's 20 to 25% owned, if you're sharing them in a large hold GBP, you're not going to be getting as much leverage and moving up the leaderboard nearly as much. So that's why we prefer guys that are a little bit lower owned. If you guys want to download this sheet with all of my projections for Saturday, you guys can find those on my Patreon page. And I would say the ownership as you go down in the pricing is where it gets more and more important. I'll take a few chalky guys in the 9, 10K range, but you won't see that whatsoever in the 6 and 7K range. I'm almost all pivots down there, especially in just an 18-hole sample size. And because it's round 3 and we don't have the placement points in play, you don't get any extra boost for where you're starting. And I would say, if anything, you're actually getting a negative boost based on your leaderboard position, because as we mentioned with the weather, I think it's going to get a bit firmer throughout the day, and the winds could also become a little bit more consistent. So that's why I'm taking some shots on guys in the middle to even the bottom end of the leaderboard that just made the cuts, because you're getting a little bit more leverage and that potential weather edge. So the next thing we're going to go through would be actually building your player pool. We're going to go through some shots gained metrics. This is where those player pool deep dives are going to come in. But the round 2 stats are going to help guide us a bit. That's why we've got these top 2 categories. Ball striking poppers are guys that are hitting it well to try and kind of tail that and see if we can keep it going. We've got short game regression, guys that are maybe hitting it okay, but we're giving it all away with the short game. If they can even just be a neutral in the short game categories, a lot of times these short game regression candidates that can have quite the 180 from day to day. So that's the round 2 stuff coming in here. But because golf is so variant, and this is why the ownership is oftentimes worth fading for this 18-hole sample size, we don't just want to be looking at round 2. Round 2 is going to have a lot of noise, and it's going to be hard to get through all of that noise to find the true signals, which is why we have these bottom 3, where we've got high upside plays. We didn't know round 2 and round 3 showdown is all about the birdie or better production you're posting. So we want guys that can make the most of birdies. The guys that are the most aggressive on tour are what you're going to find with that. We've got course history, guys that have played well at this track. This is one of the stickier course history courses on tour. So I think that one is especially valuable for round number 3. And then I also put in Bermuda grass putters. I did take out the fairway category as there was a little bit less correlation for round number 2. But Bermuda, the surface of the week, is something that you can look at because it's an extremely polarizing surface. Kind of like Pella, where some guys love it, some guys hate it. Bermuda's that same exact way, where players that grew up on it, maybe that played college golf on Bermuda grass, tend to have a lot more success on it than guys from the European Tour that have never seen it before, or players from the West Coast that only see Bermuda when they're playing it in tournament play. So that's something that I personally look at in my player pool, but I just point out these tags to help you kind of give you reasons to build your player pool. You should never just be picking names out of a hat. you should always have an idea of why you're using the players that you are, but also so that you get thinking about this kind of process. Start thinking about the types of tags and the types of characteristics that you're looking for in your plays. And if you want to add on top of this, obviously feel free to. I think that's a great way to make sure that you're getting to players that aren't going to get as much steam as maybe some of these other categories. Because I can tell you, like the top 2 categories, ball striking and short game aggression, there are a lot of other people that do that. In fact, like the round before stats, like the round 2, round 3 stats before round number 4, are like the go-to for all the slappies out there. In fact, even some of your, like what I like to call shitter players, people that literally enter lineups while they're taking a shit in the middle of the night, will sometimes still look at the shots gained metrics to build your lineups. What you won't see a lot of people doing is opening it up to some of the longer term stuff. And I find that to be a massive mistake, because we know golf has so many ups and downs, so many ebbs and flows, as they say, that if you aren't careful, you're going to be chasing your tail oftentimes if you're using these shots gained metrics, which is why it's important to have a more well-rounded process. And not to say that you have to be looking at the same exact things that I am, but you should have a process for getting to guys that weren't just playing well the day before. So that's personally what I get to. And with my entire player pool, if you guys are part of my golf DFS tier, by the way, link in the description of the video to go out there and check it out. But every single player that I have in my player pool in this little category that's blacked out over there has the rhyme and reasoning with it, so that I can kind of communicate with you guys and give you an idea of why I'm playing the players that I am. It helps clean up my process, and it helps give you guys, an idea of what I'm actually thinking. So again, check out the Patreon page if you guys want to get all of those projections. But now let's go through building our player pool for tomorrow and some of the deep dives. So if there's any players that you're curious about, feel free to let me know. If we don't go through them together, when we go through these stats, I will give you guys a little bit of extra information on anyone that you're curious about. But let's start off with the round 2 stats and the ball striking first. This is the most consistent part of golf, so oftentimes we're looking to tail these guys from day to day. Michael Kim hit the ball the best out of anyone, and he also lost strokes putting. So his low round could have actually been even better than the -3 that he scored. And luckily for us, we had him in our player pool today. And by the way, decent showdown day. We had a lot of the really good plays in our player pool, but I had one stinker in all my large field GPP builds. And if you know anything about the large 150 maxes, you have a stinker in your lineups and they're just not going to get there. So we were close but no cigar, about 15 points off the optimal with multiple lineups. And Michael Kim was one of the bright spots on that, though. It was one of the optimal plays that we did end up getting to. And I would say that with this kind of shots gained profile, then it's not inconceivable that we'd go back to him in round number 3. And number 2 was a Daniel Berger. Obviously, at -13, you'd probably expect him to have scored very well. Not quite as well as round 1. He was closer to a neutral in the 2 short game categories, which we expected because he had been a massive gainer around the green and putting Thursday. It was, very, very hard to think that he was going to gain 3 to 4 strokes once again. But he still did it with the ball striking. So I hate to say it like that he's got this thing in the bag, but for having a massive lead like he has, 6 shots and this kind of stat profile, if anyone's going to go wire to wire, it's this sort of player. And we'll see, the nerves are going to become a factor. He knows this golf course is going to be very hard, and he's going to get the short end of the stick with conditions for the next few days as well. So we'll have to see if he can continue that. But as of now, it looks rock solid, almost like, an 8.5, a 9 out of 10 stat profile. And that's me even being a little bit nitpicky. Next up, we got a Siwoo Kim. He was number 3 in shots gained to ball striking. Like Michael Kim, also lost strokes with the putter. So the 2 Kims, if they can find a way to gain putting and then hit the ball like today, they could be in line for nutted performances tomorrow. So those are 2 guys that are on my short list, especially Siwoo Kim, I'd say. Ricky Fowler also playing well. I know we had the question from Antonio about that. And I would say that his stat profile today was about an 8, maybe even an 8.5 out of 10, because he gained ball striking and then was just a slight positive between the around the green and the putting. So that's definitely a good sign of things to come from my guy, Rick. And then you have Rory McIlroy, gained ball striking, but also was able to get something out of it with the putter. It wasn't like he gained 3 or 4 strokes putting, though. So it's not inconceivable that he could go out there and gain 1 or 2 strokes putting again tomorrow. So, maybe let's say a 6.5, 7 out of 10 stat profile. Not quite the 8.5, 9 like some of those other players that trended better with the short game, but still a much better stat profile than most. And Austin Smotherman continues to stripe the ball. We kind of asked ourselves before the week whether he'd be able to continue that in these stronger fields, and it looks like he is to this point. So credit to him. Somebody that in the 6K range, you could use it. I think he might even be a 7K range player now because of how he's played. Crazy. Either way, a cheaper guy that you can use to save a little bit of salary. They've got a Jordan Spieth there. Xander Schauffele also well into the positive. Xander also lost 2 strokes putting, so perhaps could get some regression to go his way there. And then even down to these like Michael Thorbjornsen, Seps, Joel Damons, Pearson obviously missed the cut along with Joel, but a Matt McCarty, a Lucas Glover, you want to give these guys a bit of a bump. And unlike the guys in the top 5 of the ball striking that, I mentioned us not being the only ones looking at ball striking candidates or short game regression candidates in their process. These are going to be the ones, though, that you see that steam on. The shitter players aren't always going to do deep dives on the full field. So if you go into that 5 to 10 range, or even better yet than that 10 to 20 range on the ball striking today, guys that were a little bit above the average in those categories, if you can find that kind of a stat profile, and then maybe one of those other 3 categories that I was looking at, that'd be the high upside, the course history, or the Bermuda putters. Those are my favorite plays for tomorrow, because not only do they have the data points work in their direction, but they'll be a little bit sneakier, but then they have some of the long-term stuff also being checked out. So especially with my single entry plays, that a lot of those guys you're going to see in that kind of format for me. Then if we take a look at the short game, a lot of guys that lost strokes here, we could expect it to be a little bit better the next day. Unfortunately, a lot of them did miss the cuts. Losing 4 strokes putting will do that for you. But if you're an Adam Scott who gained ball striking, gained tee to green, but then was 2.5 strokes into the negative on the greens, that's somebody that I'd expect, even if he's just about a neutral tomorrow, to have one of the better rounds of the day. So an Adam Scott, somebody that is trending upwards into moving day. Johnny Vegas, he wasn't a ball striking gainer, but he only lost about 0.65 shots to the field. So him losing the 3 strokes short game was the much bigger issue. If he can get that to be a neutral, and then round number 1, Johnny Vegas hit the cover off the golf ball. If he gets back to that, he could be in pretty good shape. But like a Corey Connors, a Keith Mitchell gained ball striking, but lost over 3 strokes between the short game categories. Those are players that are trending upwards heading into tomorrow. And, on the flip side, a Grazerman, a Henley, a Bhatia, a Fitzpatrick. By the way, Bhatia has gained a whole bunch putting 2 days in a row. And it wasn't just the putting today. Bhatia also gained 2.5 around the green. It's hard to do it 2 days in a row. It's even harder to do it 3 days in a row on the PGA Tour. So, he's that rare example of somebody that was able to keep it going. But a lot of these other players that you're seeing on here, I'd expect to be closer to a neutral in round number 3. And same thing around the green. Gaining a whole bunch around the green is not necessarily a good sign. And the ones that check both boxes, like a Matty Fitz, a Sahith Theegala, and Akshay Bhatia, unless you love them with some of the longer term stuff, you're not going to see them in my player pool for tomorrow. So that's how I use the shots gain metrics to my advantage. It's still only round number 3, so I'm not usually looking at the round 1 stuff all that much. If you want to, you can take a look at the full event shots gained and maybe use that. Like, for example, if you want to go to the top ball strikers, like we know Berger's been light solid through the first 2 days, but like a Goddard gets a benefit there. Siwoo Kim's been a consistent ball striker, and a Straka through the first couple rounds. You can do that as well. That's, I think, a valid way to maybe add onto your player pool if you need to add a few extra guys. But primarily, it's the round 2 stuff for me, at least when it comes to the shots gained metrics, and then adding on top of it with some of the longer term metrics. And to go back to the spreadsheet, just to show you where you guys can find some of that stuff for tomorrow. On the right side, we've got the Bermuda putting stats. It's a good way to find that category. Got course history at the very bottom as well. And then if you guys go on the Bet the Numbers site, by the way, there's a link in the description to join with a free trial there, to try all these tools for free. Of course, if you use code Gsluke, it'll help you out with that as well. But let me see. I forget how they did this. I think it's under this now. They changed up the UI on here a little bit. But if you go to betting markets, you click on round props, and then you scroll down to the bottom, you can sort this by birdie average. You can change the sample size to whatever you'd like. So, for example, like the last 32 rounds, and then find some of those top-end birdie makers. All ways to help build your player pool for tomorrow. And the best thing about this is if you want to look at like the top fairway percentage guys, your top green regulation percentage, a lot of the different stats that I use for my prop and betting exposure, you can also use that to build your player pool. And, I mentioned maybe having extra reasons or not the same reasons as I have to build your player pool. That'd be a really good way to do that research on, something that's not curated for you. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. Again, link in the description to try that out via the free trial, or code Gsluke will get you access to that. But let's catch up on any of those deep dives that people were asking about. So you had a thing about, I believe, Ricky before. Yeah, his stat profile is like a 7.5, 8 out of 10. So I think he's got a decent chance to keep it going. Let's look at Harry Hall, though. That's the one that I don't think we have given the proper deep dive to quite yet. So if I could type it correctly, we'd get Harry Hall to come up. He gained putting and then was neutral in the other 3 categories. Well, he is a really good putter, so he could conceivably keep that going. However, it's not like the stat profile would be why you're playing a Harry Hall here. Like, it's not a positive to see somebody that's a neutral then had their big spike with the putter. But if you're looking at like a high upside guy, he made a shit ton of birdies last year. Maybe you're looking at like a course history stat or even Bermuda putting. I believe he's a good Bermuda grass putter. That could be a reasoning for playing him for tomorrow. And I think I'm like 99% sure that he's not in my player pool, but he was somebody that I was highly considering for it. There were, like I said, a couple reasons that I could have put him in my player pool for tomorrow. Let's see. You said 17 and 18 are almost hard to watch. Not for me. I love that carnage. In fact, I'll probably be sitting on 17 and 18 tomorrow because I love seeing those bogeys. But I feel you for DFS. For DFS purposes, a lot of bogey-free rounds die on those 2 holes. What's going on, Anthony? You said you like Akshay to clutch up and win. I just hope somebody makes it interesting. He's in good position to do so in second place. The one thing I'll mention about this golf tournament, though, is that the leaderboards are almost always just stud at the top. Rory, guys like Goddard, Cam Young, Scotty, Adam Scott, like those kind of guys, I'd expect to make a run over the next 36 holes. So somebody's going to catch Daniel. It might even be an Akshay Bhatia. But I think some of those studs might even get into the mix. And it's going to have a lot to do with Berger. If he shoots +3 tomorrow, it's going to be a real interesting Sunday. Yeah, greens are going to be super hard to hold by the last round. Heck, even tomorrow, they're going to be like concrete, I'd imagine. You're looking at Pendrith. Okay, let's do a little deep dive. His stat profile heading into today was great, and it's not quite as good for round number 3, but he still gained off the tee. The slight losing on approach is why it falls off a bit, but he lost with a putter in multiple days. So, yeah, that's the thing with Pendy. If he can find a way to gain putting, that's going to do wonders for his chances to go low and post like 6 to 7 birdies. But he's hitting the ball reasonably well, especially if you go back to round 1, you'll see why we were on him for today. I'd be willing to give him another shot. He's playing, I'd say like 6 out of 10 golf, which for somebody at the bottom end of the pricing is okay enough. He's like, Grazeman's stats are crazy looking, assuming that he put it in the water off the tee. Yeah, he did. Man, he had the most psycho scorecard other than David Ford that we've seen for like the last couple weeks. He hit multiple out of bounds balls. So he had the one out of bounds. Let's get to the round 2 so I can show you that. He had the one out of bounds on 11. And then I think it also hit one. It was either on 5 or 9. I think it was 5. And he hit one out of bounds. Then he saved bogey from the second tee shot, which is very hard to do. It's like making a birdie, right? On your second ball. Yeah, that's the problem for him off the tee. But his iron play was good. He gained a shit ton of strokes putting. I worry about the putting, though. Coming back down to neutral, that could be like a 4-stroke swing right there, which is hard to get over, in my opinion. Is Keith Mitchell's short game performance this week on par with his average? Let's look. So, no, not really. I mean, him losing 3-stroke short game is certainly worse than what he's used to. Let's look at round number 1. Round 1, he gained strokes with the putter. So if you put it together, yeah, this would be about his average with the short game. But the around the green has been a glaring weakness. He's a lot better around the green now than he used to be. If you were talking 3 years ago, this would be what Keith Mitchell typically did because he would hemorrhage strokes with the chipping and putting. But he joined with Joe Mayo, obviously one of the best short game coaches in the entire world. And he's gone from sketchy around the green to about average around the green. So yeah, you'd expect him to improve there. The putting, though, is usually hit or miss. Him gaining putting and then losing putting the next day is just kind of like his baseline. He does that quite a bit, I'd say. Fading Harmon for strokes for the over at 72.5. You're asking if I would take that. I was looking at it. I do think conditions will be about the same as today, maybe slightly harder. We'll go through the pin locations. And yeah, Brian Harmon not playing that well this week. So he'd be somebody I would at least keep in consideration for that. I personally was looking at some 71.5s though, Antonio, for fades. So we'll talk about that here in a bit. What made the course play more difficult today? The course got firmer. Also, the pin locations were a little bit harder. And you said, will they make the pins easier for tomorrow? I went through the pins earlier, and they didn't seem that much easier. We're going to do it again, so I'm going to get a second look at them just in case. But they looked like maybe even harder than today, I would say. Like especially like some of like the par 5s look like they're not going to be as scoreable. So we'll go through it. A few locations, a few tee boxes will probably be moved up, but we're not going to know that ahead of time. Thoughts on Fitzy? You said Donkey Chalk making a run this weekend. Yeah, I'm not sure I'd call him Donkey Chalk, to be honest. He was like number 5 or 6 in the ownership. I'd call Nico Højgaard Donkey Chalk. He was like 30%. He gained a bunch with the short game, so I'm not sure if the stat profile is a big positive for him. So yeah, I would say the stat profile is a 3 out of 10. It's not a great stat profile, especially the fact that he lost all those strokes on approach. However, he had been doing it in the opposite fashion for the last couple weeks. And just to show you why, maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel for Fitz. The last couple weeks have been his best iron weeks really on tour ever. Especially, the Pebble Beach. He gained 7 strokes with the approach there. 3 at the Genesis was solid, especially in a strong field like that. And then he had another 4 at the Phoenix Open. So yeah, if he gets back to that and then continues to do the short game, nuclear round could be in there for Fitz. But yeah, I wouldn't call him Donkey Chalk. He wasn't, I don't think he was highly owned as a lot of other people, to be frank with you, man. Let's go through some prop stuff next. So we've got the averages on here, played a little bit harder, like somebody just asked about in the chat. Birdie average went a bit down. Firm greens, slightly harder pins were the reason for that. Bogey average went up a little bit too, and it's same exact reasons there. Honestly, they both moved almost the exact same. So I think that was almost entirely because of those conditions. The fairway average also went down a bit, probably because they're drying out a little bit more. And then the green average only went down to like 10.8 per round. I actually think that might move down even more for round number 3. And that's even despite the cut line getting some of the out of form players out of there. The course is going to get drier. Then as you'll see with these pin locations, they're not easy. They're no snack to attack for normal. And a lot of times round number 3 are the easiest pin locations that we'll see the entire week. There are a couple holes, especially on the back 9, where it's literally the hardest possible pin location that you could take at this golf course. So I would say that these averages are going to stay about the same. I think there's a chance, though, that they get harder than what they were. But the reason why I'm going to say that they're going to stay the same and I'm going to take a more conservative approach with my projections is because normally moving days a little easier, right? That's just normally how it works out. But based on what I saw with the setup, it doesn't look like quite a moving day setup. So we'll show you that here in just a minute. Puerto Rico Open averages, you can see right there. They did not play through the rain. They had rain and wind round 1. It was just wind for round number 2. So that's why it played a little bit easier. Round number 3, it's going to be the same way. It looks windy in Puerto Rico. So those averages maybe get slightly easier because it's a moving day setup and the cut line. You're getting a lot of really shitty players out of there. It's an alternate field event. So the bottom of that field is as nasty as it possibly gets. So yeah, I'd say maybe a minus 1.75 average is what I'd say for Puerto Rico. Joburg Open is not going to finish till the morning, so I highly doubt that we're going to get props for that. However, the average was about the same as the first day. It was slightly over par for round 1. It was slightly under par for what we had so far in round 2. So round 3, it probably stays in that same range. Maybe gets a little easier because of the cut line, getting some of those shitty players out of there. Also, it's been raining in Joburg. So actually, in fact, now that I've remembered that, the rain softens up the golf course. So it'll probably actually play easier. And the cut line, getting those shitty guys out of there, we'll say minus 0.5 to minus 1 at Joburg. I think it'll probably make a pretty big difference. And then lastly, at Live Hong Kong, it played minus 2.91. It played minus 2.75 for the first day. And weather, though, looks a lot different for Hong Kong. Hong Kong has a bunch of wind. It looks like it's going to be about 15 to maybe even 20 miles an hour wind that they're dealing with. So that's going to be a pretty big difference. I don't think it's going to play hard. Still very short course. It's like 6,600 yards. It's shorter than the short little memes next to me that are little hidden giggles that the public plays on. It's still going to play to minus 2 probably, but not quite the minus 3 scoring average that we've had for the last few days. But let me show you those pin locations so I can kind of explain to you why. I don't think it's going to get that much easier. So first off, at hole 1, it's a front pin location, which a lot of people would look at this pin sheet and say, oh, it's probably going to play easier. You have no idea what you're talking about if you're saying that. It's a front pin location on an extremely firm green complex. In fact, look at Daniel Berger today. He hit it just over the bunker, and look where the fucking ball ended up. Ended up nearly in the bunker over the green. How the hell do you think they're going to get close to the pin location that is a pace over that bunker? Newsflash, they're fucking not. They're not going to get close to that pin location. So the birdie average here is going to be almost non-existent. If you're going to make a birdie, it's because you're chipping in, you're making like a 30-footer. So by the way, the only chance you have to hit it close is going to be to hit the fairway, which, by the way, is extremely hard to do at 1. I'm not sure if it's the hardest fairway to hit. If it's not, it's 1 or 2 on the golf course in terms of difficulty in hitting the fairway. If you don't hit the fairway, don't even think about hitting it close to that pin location. But even if you do, you've got to be like the highest ball hitter in the field. You got to be like a Scotty or a Rory. And you've got to hit the nutted shot to get the ball to stop after one hop. And even then, it's going to be like 10 feet past the hole because it's going to hop like 10 feet towards that second spot. So this is a harder pin location, despite what a lot of people would probably think looking at that overhead view. And by the way, it just comes down to course firmness. If this was a soft course, then yeah, it would be an easy pin location. But obviously, we're not playing at a poop fest or that sort of thing. Let's go to 2 next. 2 is a front right corner pin. It's actually what I think is going to be the hardest pin location at this hole. The reason for that is that if you're going to get it close to one of these pin locations, especially if it's playing 200, 225 yards, is you got to let it land and then release up to the hole. And as you can see, there's a ton of slope from the right side to the left side of this hole, which means if you're going to get it to this tucked on the right side pin, you've got to land it short of the green, and then it's going to roll up and got to get close. Because if you land it on the green in line with the pin, it's going to end up way the hell over here. In fact, you're probably going to end up in that bunker a lot when you're going for that pin location. So this is a hole where I'd imagine the birdie average is less than 10%, maybe even closer to like a 5% birdie average at 2. And I think you're going to see a lot of bogeys. If you miss in that bunker over the back, you've got no chance to hit it close. So good luck to the field on that one, especially if they fully tip it out. But it is a moving day setup, and that's an extremely difficult pin. And anytime I see a really hard pin on moving day, it makes me think that they might move up the tee box a little bit just to help them out. Hole 3 is another front pin location, and all of your dumbasses will see this and go, oh, this is an easier pin location. Wrong, dumbass. You would be completely wrong about that. It's tucked just over this bunker. It is a front pin with firm greens. How the hell do you hit it close to this? I seriously don't know how you can. The only thing I would say, though, is that if you hit it in the short stuff and you're one of the super long bombers, you can carry it over the corner, then maybe you have a chance to hit it close if you have like 100 yards in. But if you're somebody that's laying up off this tee, like a lot of your drivers that aren't as confident, you're going to have like 160 yards into that front pin location. Like hole number 1, you've got no shot to hit it within 10 feet if you're playing from that far out. So I think that based on holes 1 through 3, like your elite tier drivers could still score, but everyone else is going to hope to get past this in like +1. Like I'd say +1 through 3 for like over half the field would be an acceptable score for tomorrow. Let's go to 4 next. 4 is a middle left. It's your first chance at a par 5. I would say it's about the same difficulty as today, maybe a hair more difficult. The only reason I say a hair more difficult is that you're attacking a very narrow portion of the green. Over here, it's a lot deeper. You have more room to get it up and down, for example. So on this left side, I still think you're going to see some birdies because of the par 5 format, but maybe a little bit less than today. Let's go to 5 next. So 5 is going to be a back middle pin location about over here. This is going to be harder than today. It's a longer shot in, and you've got some slope that, you know, if you're landing on a downslope down here, it's going to be really close to hit it to the hole. And there's a bit of a runoff area over the back too. So if you hit something in here without spin or maybe with a little bit of heat on it, it could be a really difficult up and down. Let's go to 6 next. So 6 is the Lake par 5. Let's think of the word for it. This front right pin is the second hardest pin at the hole. The hardest is the one that you had for today. So this is a hole that should get a little bit easier, but it's not as easy as round number 1. Round 1, it was on this front left corner, I guess is the best way to put it. And you had enough room to where if you hit it in this bunker, you could chip it and get it close. If you went over here, you had some room to get it close. And then even if you hit it in the fairway, like 60 yards short, you had enough room to attack that pin. Now that it's on the right side, you're short-sided if you hit it to the right. And by the way, you can't miss left. Left is the lake. So I feel like I didn't have to explain that. But yeah, that's a lake over there. You can't miss over there. So now that it's on this side, it's going to be a harder up and down rate, I would say. So still one that you could get on the green, maybe 2 putt for birdie. But birdie rate there stays the same, maybe slightly less bogeys, though, because it's a little bit of a shorter shot in. Let's go to the next hole. So 7 is a front left pin location. It's about where my cursor is now. I would say that it's about the same difficulty, maybe a hair easier than today. Only a hair easier because it is a bit of a shorter shot in. Hole number 8 is the hardest pin on the golf course. So this is one of the holes, and the next hole too, by the way, 9, where it's like, what the hell are they doing? It's a back left pin location. So just over the water, the narrowest portion of this green. You've got a bunch of slope from the back to the front. So if you go over the back, you've got next to no chance to hit the ball close. You're going to see a ton of doubles at hole number 8. Let's do 9 next. So 9 is going to be in the very back of this green. So it's going to be a longer shot in. It's one that's very hard to get up and down to as well, because if you miss the fairway, most players were hitting it into one of these front two bunkers, which the back corner is going to be an extremely long bunker shot, and one that is going to have a sub 50% up and down rate. Let's go to 10 next. So 10 is a bit of an easier hole. It's a front left pin, but you have to be coming out of the fairway to have any chance at hitting it close. The reason I say that is that it's tucked just over this bunker. If you are coming out of the fairway, you can hit the one hop and stopper to like 10 feet. But you can see, especially if it was a soft golf course, there'd be some birdies to be had. But the firm nature of it is really going to make this course, I think, hold its weight over the next couple days. Let's go to 11 next. 11's in the very back. It was back left. Now it's like back middle towards where my cursor is now. It's a slightly harder pin because all of the slope goes from the right to the left. So any right miss is going to be short-sided and downslope. Let's go to 12. So 12 is going to be a back left pin, long hole, maybe about the same difficulty as today, though. It's about the same kind of shot in. It's just now that you want to miss on the right instead of missing on the left like today. Let's go to 13. 13 is a middle right pin. It's pretty close to the water, and there's some slope over there. So if you're coming from the fairway, you could conceivably spin it down that slope and into the water. So I'm going to say about the same difficulty, but I think there's going to be more doubles at 13 because of its proximity to the penalty area. Let's go to 14 next. 14 is in the back right. It's I'd say about the same difficulty pin-wise, but they moved up the tee box here. So if this tee box gets moved back, it's going to come a really long shot into this very back pin location, and it's going to play pretty difficult. So yeah, this is a hole that I'd expect to play harder, even though it's moving day. Let's go to 15 next. 15 is like the hardest pin on the golf course too. If it's not 8 that you have for tomorrow, it's going to be this hole. It's in between two slopes. It's in the very back, so it's playing long. It's going to play like 500 yards. But you have the slope over here, which has a big chipping hollow down there, and this chipping hollow towards the left side. So it's almost like this green plays half the size at the very back. And if you miss over here, it's a very hard chip. If you miss down in that chipping hollow or in the rough, if it runs the whole way down, then it's an almost impossible chip towards that very back corner. So this is a hole where if you make a par, you're probably going to gain like a half a stroke to the field. It should play that difficult. 16 is a middle right pin. It's on top of the slope now. So it's not quite as hard as maybe it was today, because that back left is, at least for my money, probably the hardest pin at this hole. But it's not as easy as round one either. Round one, it was below the slope, which meant that you had some backstop to use. You could even hit a wedge shot off of it and get it pretty close. Now, though, you can't use that. You have to actually get it over that slope, which firm greens is going to be pretty hard to do. And then if you miss short, the up and down's also a little bit trickier. And then 17 is also insanely hard. 17 is a back right pin location. It's way back here. And by the way, if they tip it out, it's going to play like 230 yards. I think that they're probably going to move up the tee box. Now, they'll probably keep it about where it was today. I'm not sure they're going to move it up to this tee like they did for round number 1. But if they play it from the whole way in the back, like they move it back an extra 15 yards, and it's that back right pin location, this is like a half a stroke over par 3. But because it's moving day, I just don't see them doing that. If this was Sunday, I think there would be somewhat of a chance that they do so, but we'll see what they end up going with. If they do, I'll be there for it. I'll be sitting there all day just watching the bogeys, because that one's ridiculous. And then finally, 18 is a front left pin location. This is by far the easiest pin that you get at 18. So this is finally, and I feel like this is like the only true moving day pin that we saw in that entire setup, where it's shorter, it's going to have a higher birdie average, it's more attackable. Even if you hit it in the rough, you can go after this front left pin location. But what other pin that can we say that about, right? Like, I'm going to grab my whiskey here, get a sip as I look through these pin locations. None of them look like your classic moving day setup. Like maybe a 7. Like 7 seems like a pretty attackable shot. But the rest of the golf course is set up, I think, as stingy as it could possibly get. So, in fact, now that I've gone through it a second time, I'm going to keep the scoring average over par. I'm going to say at least plus 0.25 to a +1 scoring average. I think there's a chance that if it continues to firm up too, and these tricky kind of spots, that could even get to the carnage level in the afternoon. So birdie average probably stays about the same. Very rare for moving day setup that we'd say that, but I just don't see the easier pin locations. Bogey average might slightly go down. but I don't really see it. I think it might even go up. I'd say there's a chance that goes up to like 3.5 per round. So that's what we've got for the averages. And I was eyeing some fades before we got on here, and I think that that's definitely the way to go about attacking the slate. So there were some 71.5s that were kind of catching my eye. Some ones that were even money, even some ones with slight multipliers that I think might make some sense. And I want to go later tee times if possible, but I'm not going to marry myself to that because there's still going to be some wind in the morning. So if there's some guys up here that aren't hitting the ball the best that we can fade, I think it's totally okay to do so. And even if our birdies are better, I was looking at this board and thinking about taking some fades. And in fact, let's just do the first slip together. So after seeing the harder pins, I feel pretty confident about this golf course being pretty difficult. Let's take these two. So this will be a 3.01x payout. Disable developer mode. What the fuck does that mean? Okay, let's refresh this and see if I can enter that slip. It's the first time I've ever seen that. Let's go for our max on this account of $25. And it still says disable developer mode. Okay. Well, I'm not sure what to do. Let me stop sharing. Let me reopen the Underdog tab. Maybe that'll be the best way to go about it. They've got me in some developer mode for some reason, even though I don't work for the company. Apparently, I've got the back end on here. Not sure how that works. Let's see if it'll let it do us now. So we got 3.01x. There we go. Okay, finally it'll let us enter those. So the reason why we took those, Bridgman at 71.5, even par or worse, ends up hitting for us. If I think the average to the field is going to be over par or even par, maybe at the easiest, then Bridgman would be valued towards the over. And, no disrespect to him. He had the big win a couple weeks back. But before that, especially in an elite tier field like this, he was an average to below average player. So I always look at the long-term skill set of those guys, especially because he gained a whole bunch of strokes putting today. And I just don't think he's going to keep that going. And just to show you that, because obviously a lot of you guys probably haven't seen that quite yet, Bridgman gained 2.7 strokes putting and actually lost approach. So I think that leans into that. And then you've got Brian Harman going off early, who we could have taken for the 72.5 strokes. That was something somebody asked about before that I was thinking about taking. But the birdie or better prop, especially with him being such a low birdie percentage guy, he's not aggressive. He's not long enough to take on the par 5s and 2 unless it's hole number 16. I guess he could. But the pin locations are hard enough to where I think it makes sense. And look at that. They're watching us live. The lines makers are scared little pussies putting multipliers on these right after we take them. But still, I think value there. And if you want to take something now, let's say you missed that, then take the strokes line, right? With that kind of a multiplier. Look at that. They're even bumping Jacob Bridgman on us. Oh, yeah. That's how you know it's value, right? When it ends up moving so quickly. You mentioned it even just gets out of my mouth. It ends up moving about 30 seconds later. But yeah, fade value for this board in general is the way that I'm looking at it. And, I don't want to say too much on here because I haven't been able to enter a whole bunch myself quite yet. And I want to make sure that me and my Patreon members are going to be able to grab enough of the value on here. But it's not just like those two, right? Like the whole board in general seems a bit optimistic. It feels like DraftKings, Fanduel, just kind of assumed that it'd be a moving day setup, that the averages might get a little bit easier because of that cut line as well. But I don't think that that's going to be the case, like especially because the wins are still up. If the wins were non-existent, then I could see it playing a little bit under par, like it did for Thursday on round number 1, the first half of Thursday especially, where it played slightly under par. But it has not done that since. It's been even to over par the last 1.5 days, the first 36 holes. So that's what I'm looking at on Underdog. Prize Picks I have not looked at whatsoever. So let me actually look at that. Look at that. Brian Harman's actually at 72 over there. So maybe if you're going to fade the strokes, it's even better to do so there. And I'm just curious to see where they have some of these guys. They do have Bridgman at 71.5. So if you missed that before the multiplier and you've got another prop that you really like for PGA, that might be a way to still get access to that without having to take it for a worse payout. Only issue with Prize Picks is that the payouts in general are worse. So I don't know how much value you're still going to get out of that. Let's see. So 71.5 on Henley. Like, you can't have Henley at 71.5, who's a top 5 player in the world and has been for like the last 6 months, and then have Bridgman at that same number. Like, Bridgman is the hot hand, but Bridgman's playing worse golf this week. In long term, they're not even in the same stratosphere. So, one of them has to be value, right? I think it's probably the over on Bridgman. That's the bigger value rather than the under on a Russell Henley. But that same idea holds. And I'm going to look at greens regulation because I think the green average, at least based on especially like the pin locations, I think it's going to dive quite a bit. So we could go back to Novak. Novak hooked us by 0.5. That was unfortunate, but it's still value in my opinion, especially with what I think is going to be an even harder golf course. Let's see, 11 for Abatia, 11 and a half for a lot of these guys. I would say that, yeah, there's still a few that maybe make sense. Like the few that were kind of catching my eye on here, I guess even Abatia at the top of the board, somebody that I'd expect to regress a little bit, especially because he's been so short game dependent over the last couple rounds. And Noren we could go back to. I faded him for 11 and a half the first couple of days, and that's worked out. Maybe even a McCarty. Like I like my guy McCarty, but in an elite tier field like this, not somebody I'd really be counting on to gain greens regulation to the field. Let's look at fairways. Fairway average probably going to stay about the same. I'm wondering where Minwoo ended up landing up because the other leg that I took on his slip today did not end up getting there, but he was value for the under 8.5, and he still would be, right? Even if he went over today, he'd still be value. What is 71%? I should be able to do that with mental math, but it's been a day. So that's 10 fairways that he hit today. So obviously went over that number. But if I liked him for the under 8.5 before, I still have to like that kind of number. So we'll at least throw that in the shopping cart for now. I'm curious on whether he's at that same number on Underdog, though. Let's see. So no fairway line posted yet for Min Woolley on that side. What's my cat doing? My cat's in the corner of the room making whimpering sounds. I was trying to make sure she's okay, but I think she's just being annoying over there. Let's see. So greens regulation as well. I did want to double check on that. They do have more selection on Underdog, which is nice. So they've got almost like triple the selection compared to Prize Pick. So if you're going to enter some of those unders, you could take a look at that as well. They do have Akshay at 11.5, but he does have a multiplier towards the under. So I guess it's kind of like pick your poison there, right? Worst payout or better line. You're able to kind of get some variety on that one. But it looks like a lot of these guys are at the same numbers. Like obviously McCarty, Novak are at 10.5. Matt Fitz is at 11.5 flat on both different sites. Just trying to see if there's any obvious pricing differences between these two. And for bogeys or worse, I think it'll be about a 3.5 bogey or worse average. So there could be some overs on guys that maybe aren't hitting it as well. That could make sense, especially if they're like a heavy multiplier towards the over. But it's mostly later tee times that they have on here. It's not like the first hour of tee times that we have a whole lot to even choose from. A Tommy Lab at 2.5 might even be tempting, though. I know he's one of the better players in the field and an elite tier bogey avoider at that, but it's an elite tier field. It's a 3.5 bogey or worse average. He could even have 0.5 less than the field average and still go over for us, which is why that one might be a little bit tempting. But let's look at these birdie lines as well. We obviously saw the 3.5 on Harmon before. They've got Michael Kim at that same number. I'm curious on whether any elite tier guys would be at 3.5 birdies, because if you gave me a good enough player at 3.5, especially somebody that's hitting the ball well, then I could see myself taking their over. But it does look like any of the legit guys on the field at 3.5 birdies mostly have multipliers towards the over. So for example, like a Morikawa's got the 0.76. Chris Goddard's one that I would have taken at even money. He's at a 0.83x multiplier. So that kind of takes away a lot of the value on that, in my opinion. Like a Siwoo Kim might have been playable, but he's got the 0.94x multiplier on it. Same thing with the Jordan Spieth. You guys know I'll find any reason possible to try and take a Jordan Spieth prop. So it's so annoying that Underdog does that with the multipliers. They're so bump heavy. They have no idea how much they're limiting the action that they could get if they would just be a little bit less bump heavy than what they were before. But unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do to control that. So let's go back to the strokes board to see if there's anything else that's really catching my eye. Even the 72.5s, I know we took like the over 71.5 on a Bridgman, but like the 72.5s and some of these lower tier players, I think would still make quite a bit of sense for the over, especially if they were guys that were losing strokes on approach, maybe short game dependent. So to go back to the stats, let's find a few of those candidates. So let's go to the top end of the putting list and then players that lost ball striking. So for example, like we could pick on Fitzy, I guess, but that's why Bridgman made sense for a fade. That's why even like a Russell Henley, I guess, could make sense in theory for a fade because of this kind of a stat profile. And what's his line look like? And look at that. The whole board just got ripped off. What's that about? Did they have like some odds drop or something and they had to take everything off? Well, either way, I guess we don't have those odds to go through anymore. Makes you wonder what the hell just happened, that they had to go out there and take the whole thing off. But let's looking at the prize picks lines, like a Max Grazerman at 72, that's an over I'd take. He's somebody that gained a bunch of putting. He was really sketchy off the tee, had the multiple out of bounds balls. Now, I don't know if we can count on an out of bounds ball coming every single day, but if the average is going to be even par or worse, he's somebody I'll take to match that or be worse because he's a below average player. Let's see. Jordan at 71.5. That's definitely an optimistic projection, but I'm not fading my guy Jordan. You guys are probably going to guess that. I think there's probably just better guys that you can fade at 71.5 that aren't quite as one of those top tier players. So that's what I'm seeing. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on down there, and then probably go through some matchup stuff to end this. He said Højgaard is struggling. You're pairing his under on birdies with Scotty under 69.5. Okay, best of luck with you tomorrow, my dude. What's going on? Adam, welcome to the chat. He said, thoughts on Bridgman for the under 4 birdies? Yeah, losing in all categories but the putting, essentially. I'm with you on that. I took his over 71.5, but yeah, 4 birdies I think would make a lot of sense for that as well. And in fact, the 4 birdies, we didn't look at the birdie lines on Prize Picks. I'm assuming that's where it is, right? 4 birdies, getting to 5 to cover is very, very difficult to imagine a lot of guys are going to do that. So yeah, if you miss that strokes line, I think that's a really sharp call by Adam for something that you can mix in, because the push equity on that is extremely valuable. And in fact, what I usually like to do with like ones with push equity is go with like a 4-man slip and normally like all 4 legs with that push equity. So if you end up getting pushes, it's not the end of the world and your payouts will still still be relatively decent, because, you know, if it's a 2-leg slip and you have one of those push, it completely ruins it at times. But looking at the guys at 4, let's see if there's anyone else that makes sense. He's probably the main one. I guess a Kitayama too might be a little optimistic at that number. Anyone else? Even a Nikolai. I know somebody in chat said that, right? Maybe they said 3.5, but like the 4 with that push equity wouldn't be terrible. The problem is finding a way to get rid of that multiplier. Sometimes it's the birdie or better matchups. So let's actually just look at that quickly. See if there's any unders that make sense. You guys know me. The overs on these are normally trap plays, but every once in a while, they can find an under that is worthy of playing. But what I've seen under so far, I don't see anything too obvious where like the under guy is in play to beat them. Yeah, I guess if you guys have positive stance plays that you like, there could be some stuff to take here on the Prize Pick side. But let me look at Live Golf. Live Golf, it's supposed to be quite a bit windier. Let me just show you that. It's like Hong Kong in here. It's not going to be right on the golf course, but this will give us a general enough idea. Let's get on the right forecast and then go to GFS. You're talking about 16 miles an hour to close to 20 miles an hour at wind gusts, as opposed to literally like no wind for the first couple rounds. So when you're looking at these guys at like -3, especially some of like the sketchy, not so good players, I think there could be some fade value to be had. So let's see exactly who we have on here. So a Charles at 67 would have been the nuts, but you can see he's out there at 67.5. Arnaban Lahiri hasn't been playing that well. Same thing with a Richard Bland. He'd probably be somebody that we could substantiate taking. And then even some of these like 67s, like a Charles Howe, a Peters, or a Brendan Grace could be fadeable at that number. In fact, compared to some of these other guys at 67, like they're just like clearly worse players than a lot of the other guys that they have on here. And I guess we'll just double check the leaderboard to see if any of these guys are also playing poorly right now. So Peters, Grace, and Howe are who we're going to want to check. So 1 second while I bring up the Live Golf leaderboard, because I have not been super plugged in on Live this week, to be honest with you guys. Let me just see what we're working with. Let's do Grace first. Grace is in T23. It's like middle of the board. Let's go. Peters is also at that same number. And then we look at Howell, and then I want to look at Charles too. Those are the other ones. Let's go Howell first. Howell's T30, and let's go Charles. Charles also, sorry, the other Charles is T45. You could really feed any of these guys then. None of them are like in contention in the top 5, top 10, where we're worried about their form being overly good. I guess the other thing we could look at would be their averages coming in. And yeah, let's do that. 1 second here, guys. We're going to go to Hong Kong the last 6 months. And we're going to take the worst player out of these guys. And we're going to get a slip on prize picks out of this, which is going to be the good thing. But over the last 6 months, let's go Peters, Howell, Charles. Who else? Let's go Grace. I'm just trying to see. I guess we'll throw Tringale in there too. I think Tringale may actually have the worst stats out of all of them. But let's see. So over that stretch, yeah, the worst stats out of all of them is Cameron Tringale, averaging over a stroke loss per round. That's horrendous. But he is losing a lot of that with his off-the-tee play. And this is a course where the off-the-tee play doesn't matter as much. So it might be better to go to a Charles Schwartzel. Well, if he was at 67 strokes, it definitely would have been better to go to Charles Schwartzel. But let me look at Charles Howell. So, yeah, he's had 2 dog shit starts to start this year. He had a couple Asian Tour starts that went his way, but that's the Asian Tour, let's be honest. Do we really care about that? I know I don't really care about that all that much. So if he's at 67 strokes and he's got to shoot -4 to go under that, he's probably the best value that we have on the board on that. So you know what? We'll take Charles Howell there, especially because he's not playing like his best golf this week. And then what we're going to do is you can take that. You can play it with like the under and Bridgman if you want to go with a 2-man slip. But I'm actually going to try and find something else to take with it instead. So I think kind of going with the under on 4 birdies might be a good way to go about it. We don't want to ignore the 3.5s, though. There could still be some 3.5 birdies that make sense. And in fact, let me just look at Berger. What's Berger at? So Berger's at 3.5, and he's about even money. Let's say like maybe he's juiced towards the under, and we could take that. But let me look at Rio. Rio's not a very big birdie maker. I know he's playing well, but I'm just kind of curious on what his numbers would be. He's also about even money at 3.5. Let me look at Nick Taylor, too. That's another one I'm kind of curious about. Is also about even money at that number. Michael Kim, we can line shop. And then McCarty, I guess. Let's do McCarty and then Kim. So McCarty is -130 over. And then Michael Kim is slightly juiced towards the under. The thing is, I was looking at these before, and I feel like the FanDuel board was priced a little bit less optimistically. So let's just see what that looks like. And by the way, Scotty 4.5 birdies might be a play. In fact, I'm very tempted about that. So he's at 5 birdies on prize picks. Maybe not so much at that number, but what is he over here? Is he 4.5 and even money? He's not. So he's got the 0.79x multiplier. So if he was even money, then maybe we'd think about that. But yeah, heavy multiplier is going to be a huge no thank you on that one. And I'm just curious to see what they have some of these guys for birdies at. So a Henley is juiced towards the over. Akshay is at 4.5 birdies. Are we serious? What are we? So I guess it's the opposite, actually. These are a little bit more optimistic than what we had on the other side of things. Which is interesting. Let me look at Spieth's numbers. So Spieth was juiced heavily towards the over and also is on DraftKings where he's -175 towards the over. So you could argue that even with like, well, I guess they changed the multiplier. It was 0.94x before, but now you can see it's 0.78x in that direction. And I'm curious, did they change the odds on Harman? Look at that. They changed it back. So I guess if you want to play that, you can. I guess they're reacting to these FanDuel odds because these FanDuel odds definitely changed when they dropped. When they dropped, guys like Horschel were juiced way towards the under, which is also probably why they took all these strokes lines off, right? That's why they took everyone off at once is I guess they saw the lines on FanDuel and they wanted to adjust for them. But these sites get stuff wrong all the time. I'm not going to overreact to it. My stance on the golf course still stands. I still think it's going to play a lot harder. And if anything, this could actually be to our advantage as they're going to bump some lines. Some of the public, the plus EV bettors, are going to go in there and move some of these lines in our favor. And it could open up even more fade value than what we had before. So, for example, even a Bridgman, he's now at that 71.5 again. So if you wanted to fade down and get the exact slip that we were able to take before, now you're able to get that sort of value because of that movement. So that's, I guess, an example of that in action there. Let me catch up with the chat once more. You had a 6-leg on Puerto Rico. You figure that it would play easier. There you go, Anthony. Way to take advantage of that lean. What's going on, Noah? You said, I hope the day is going well. It is. Is it stay on the Novak under on greens? I was thinking about it. I haven't entered it yet myself, but the night is still young. I've got a lot more slips still to enter. Is it in value towards the under also on DraftKings? I think so. And it's not just Novak, but you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think there could be some other guys that make sense for that as well. And it does look like they just posted some of the Puerto Rico Open lines. So you can see like a Rasmus Niergaard Peterson, a Michael Brennan has been posted at 4.5 birdies. And with the average, what was it, about 3.79 per round in round 2? That probably goes up to like 4 per round with the moving day setup. Could be some positive stance plays to take there as well. And, on top of that Charles Howell play that we pointed out, that could be another way to take away some multipliers. So don't sleep on that. Is it a Hideki rebound? Do you hope you need him for a top 20? I would say he's got a good chance for it. The stats are kind of all over the place so far, though. He said, so I like Norn for greens regulation under 11. Not so much, man. I mean, I'll brainstorm ideas with you on live stream, but unless I actually enter it myself, King, I wouldn't say that I actually like any props. Like the ones that I like so far, the ones that we've entered on Underdog that have actually put my hard-earned money behind. People ask me questions all the time, right? They want my opinions on things and I'll give them my leans, but I wouldn't say I actually like something unless you actually see me putting my money behind it. Let's look at some matchup stuff. I'm probably going to hold off on entering any more pickup stuff until I get off the live stream. Just to remind you guys, if you guys want to tell everything I'm entering for round 3, you guys can find that on the Patreon page. It's something that I'll be doing tomorrow is because I'll be there in person, is I'm going to try and get there around like 10:30ish, so just after the round starts, so that I can see where they have some of these tee boxes. I'm going to walk the back 9. I'll be entering about 18, so I'll be able to check that out right off the bat. All right, we'll see if 17 tee boxes moved up. We'll see what they're doing at some of the other par 3s on the golf course. If they're all tipped out, then there could be even more fade value than what we're going at now. So there'll still be at least a couple more slips that I'm entering for tonight. In fact, I kind of want to enter something with this Charles Howell prop, but let's get back to that here in just a few moments. I do want to go through the matchup board because we were not able to do that yesterday. Yesterday, they did not have any of the matchups even posted on Hard Rock Bet. So I'm kind of itching to get back after it especially because it's 2 balls. I love the 2-ball format. So let's see what we have on here on DraftKings. And I'm going to be entering these on Hard Rock Bet. Usually the odds are pretty similar though. So even though we probably don't have the board posted yet, we can do it together on DraftKings. Let's see, you got a Novak versus a Harmon at even money, a Pendy versus Etch at even money. I kind of lean towards Etch there because he's coming in off a win and he's somebody that's due for some short game regression. Just to show you, it's not like Pendrith isn't either, but Pendrith only has that going. Nico has that and some form, but he lost around the green, also lost putting, but was about a neutral ball striking. So yeah, maybe at minus 120, you can get close, if not better odds than that on Hard Rock Bet. Might be something that you see me place a little bit later on. We'll have to see. I don't like playing these heavily juiced ones. So you're not going to see me on something like a Tommy Fleetwood at minus 215. Andrew Putnam has surprisingly really good course history here. So he might be somebody to take it like a big plus money prop against an Alex Noren, especially because Alex Noren hasn't been that impressive this week. And just to double check on that, he lost approach. He just gained a little bit off the tee. So yeah, depending on the odds that we can get on Hard Rock Bet, if that's closer to plus 135, plus 140, it might be something that you see me enter myself. Let's see, Decky versus Hovland. It's probably a stay away. Hovland's got good course history, and even though Decky looks really good, I still think that that's maybe close to a coin flip, hence the odds. And then you got a McNeely versus a Bridgman. This is where I would like a McNeely a bit. You had Bridgman, who we've already showed the stat profile before, who's a little short game dependent. McNeely, on the other hand, has been maybe not as sharp. Around 1, he was really sharp. He gained off the tee, gained to the 2 short game categories. Then today, he lost in the 3 tee to green categories. But before this on Mav, kind of like a Bridgman. I know Bridgman has the win. It's maybe a little bit flashier, but McNeely has been a lot more consistent. He's been, making some cuts, been gaining ball striking, gaining off the tee. Pebble Beach had the T29, had a top 15 at waste management. I'm not sure if even money is good enough odds, but if he was, let's say, like plus 100 or better, or like plus 105, I'd be jumping on Matt McNeely there. I'll at least keep it in the shopping cart, but yeah, I don't know. I'd probably have to get slightly better odds to play that just because Bridgman does have that win. It's not something that you can completely ignore, in my opinion. Then you've got a Fitzy versus a Taylor. If Fitzy had been gaining on approach, maybe I could consider doing that, but he lost strokes on approach today, so that's going to be a stay away from me. Then you've got a Horschel versus a Connors. Horschel's got pretty good course history, but so does Connors. Now, if I was going to take anyone here, it'd be the plus money on a Horschel, but I'm not sure that number is good enough for me to take that kind of sprinkle. If anyone's playing a Jordan Spieth at minus 200, they're certified batshit insane. I don't care who he's playing against. Jordan Spieth should never be minus 200 unless it's me that they have a matched up against. And in that case, it should be minus $1 million for those kind of odds. You get a Harry Hall versus Kitayama, a Rio versus a Daniel Bennett. This Bennett kid looks legit, by the way. He's made the cut, which is an accomplishment, even though it is a limited field like this, with how strong the field was. So tip of the cap to him. Not going to play him, though, just because he's a little bit of a unknown prospect, could be a little bit of a loose cannon. You've got Scott versus Siwoo, two ball strikers, but Adam Scott at plus money is the one that kind of catches my eye on that. Not good enough odds for me to bet. I'd probably have to be closer to plus 120 for me to bet that. But Adam Scott has been playing arguably just as good of golf as Siwoo Kim. So I'm not sure that Siwoo Kim should be a massive favorite there. Like maybe ever so slightly favorite, but minus 140 juice is probably a bit too much. If you're betting Scotty Scheffler at minus 260, you're crazy. Maybe if you could parlay it up with something else, you could make it more digestible. But yeah, unless it's as a parlay piece, you won't see me on that kind of thing. Then you got a Minwoo versus a Cam Young. Cam Young should be the favorite. So minus 122 might even be playable, but let me look at the stats, I guess. We'd have to nitpick that one just a little bit more. Let's go to the full event on both of these, actually. So Minwoo, a little short game dependent. The 2.5 around the green is a bit of a red flag. And then Cam Young's more ball striking. So yeah, minus 122, I would say would be playable on that one. So we're going to throw that one in there for sure. And I'd say of all the matchups that I've pointed out so far, that the Cam Young one's probably my favorite out of all of them. And not to sleep on Minwoo. Minwoo's been playing some pretty good golf lately, but Cam Young had the win at the Wyndham. He was really good at the Ryder Cup. He's played well at some of the few starts that he's had since then. I just think he's a different tier of player than Minwoo at this stage of his career. So we'll throw that one in there. Anywhere close to minus 120, minus 125, I would take on that one. Then you got a Collie versus a Goddard. I'm a big Goddard guy, but not at minus 175. I think a Xander versus a Henley. Xander might be playable at minus 125. The reason I say that is if we go to the round 2 stats, Xander gained ball striking but lost putting, and then Henley did it the exact opposite way. He lost approach but gained about 3 strokes putting. So even with some juice on that, that's also one that we're going to keep in the shopping cart. One of my favorites that I've seen so far. Then you got Aubert versus the Gala. Yeah, Aubert should be the slight favorite. And then Berger's the underdog against Akshay. I've got some choice words about that one. Yeah, I don't think that Berger should be the underdog against Akshay Bhatia. Berger's playing unbelievable golf. I understand that there's some quote-unquote choke factor. That's probably why he's the underdog. But there's going to be some choke factor for Akshay Bhatia too. He's in second place on this big-time field. So yeah, if you can give me plus money, anything plus 105 or better on a Daniel Berger, you're going to see me on that sort of a lean as well. So those are a few matchups that I like playing, and you can kind of see my process for it. It's similar to DFS. I went ball strikers versus guys that are struggling with the short game if you can. I'm more of a long-term guy than a short-term guy. That's why we're on things like the Cam Young prop over a Minwoo Lee. But when you can combine that with some short-term stuff as well, then I think it makes a lot of sense. And even in the second matchup, like Xander has the better shots gained metrics, but over the last 2-year sample size, he's also the better player between him and a Russell Henley. So I think that one checks out there too. The last one, you might argue that this is a 50-50 coin flip talent-wise between a Bhatia and a Berger. But I would say if you look at like the last 3-year sample size, right, from before Berger got hurt, then Berger's clearly the better player between the two. Now, if you're talking right now, then yeah, I will agree about it being closer to 50-50. But plus money, I'll have the leader playing, and I'll just remind you if you're joining us, unbelievable golf, especially with the ball striking, was number 2 in the field. It's hard to pass up at that sort of a number. So we'll take those. And to get back to that Howell prop, because I do want to take something with it, we could go with one of those fades and just take a 2-man on the PGA side. But I kind of want to look at the alternate field stuff. I want to look at the stuff that we have for Grand Reserve. And if I think the average is going to be about 4 birdies or better,
there could be some value on that side. And a John Daly Jr. might be who we take for that. Because obviously he played well again, actually even better than the first day, but the easier scoring in round number 2. So that could be something to take a shot on. Let me look at the strokes board. So we only looked at some of the birdie numbers before, but I think the average is going to be at least -1, maybe even a little bit easier than what it was for today. And they've got Clanton at 71 strokes. That's like almost disrespectful with the kind of stuff that he was posting before. I know the form has fallen off a bit, but this is a bit of a wide open course. He's used to some Florida wind down here. He's played in it more than most people. In fact, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take these two together. We're going to take the Charles Howell fade for the over at 67, and then we're going to take the under on Luke Clanton at 71 strokes. The reason we're taking the fade on Charles Howell is the slightly windier conditions in Hong Kong. Especially with him not having the best form lately, I think that one makes a lot of sense. You have to shoot -4 to go under. And then with Luke Clanton, the scoring average today was 70.5. So he can lose a half a stroke to the field, at least what it was today, and push that. He's at worst an average player in that kind of field, if not a well above average player. And in my opinion, because I've got personal connections to the guy, he's a well above average player in that kind of field, especially from the long-term standpoint. So yeah, with the push equity at 71, I'll take that all day. So it's a 3x payout. I know it's not ideal, but it's the best you can do. And these are the only sites where you're really going to find props for those two kind of events. So we'll take advantage where we can. We've got the 2-leg over here. And by the way, if you missed that before, that's the under on Brian Harmon birdies and then the over on Jacob Bridgman strokes, a couple little 3x slips. There's going to be even more exposure that I'm taking on the Patreon page. That'll be all the slips posted there. I also post all the averages that you were seeing from before. Also, I post weather reports for all these events so you can do all of your research so that you can tack the boards for yourself. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already for all of my exposure. But when we get the Hard Rock bet boards to go through, and in fact, I'm just going to double check to see if they've posted one by now. They most likely haven't, just knowing them and knowing their track record, because they didn't post a board at all today. But let's see what we have. Maybe we'll get surprised, and you'll never know. So let's go down to API. And yeah, no odds posted. So it was, I guess, worth a try to at least check it out and see if we were going to get someone to go through. But when we get odds on Hard Rock Bet, or at least fingers crossed, knock on wood, that we get them at some point, I'll be seeing what we can get. Maybe we can get similar, if not better odds than those 3 on the right. And if so, you'll see me entering at the very least those kind of a props, if not even more on top of that. But smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Let me catch them on chat before we hop on out of here. But that's all we've got really for moving day. It's going to be fun to be out there in person, to scout the golf course. Again, if you're a part of the Patreon page, or you're following me on X/Twitter, I'll likely be posting some of that boots on the ground information tomorrow. So follow me over there if you guys haven't already. The Patreon link's in the description, but also the link to my X/Twitter, which by the way is completely free. Following me over there is an absolute no-brainer if you guys haven't already. But let's catch up on chat and then wrap this thing up. You said you were looking at some of the matchups for Morikawa over Fowler, then also Xander over Henley. Well, let me look at the odds, and in the future, if you could give me the odds, that would be great, because really without them, it's difficult to give you any sort of feedback. So he was -125, it looks like, for that. So let me get back to that. Yeah, versus a Fowler. I guess it would be an okay play, just because Morikawa's the better player between the two. And it irks me to say that, because Morikawa's not my favorite player on tour, and Ricky is one of my favorite players. But yeah, being an unbiased third party, he's somebody that's probably a half a stroke better per round most of the time. So -125 is probably playable on that. And then the other one was Xander over Henley. Yeah, I agree with you on that one for sure. That's one of the ones that we pointed out already together. And as long as I'm getting similar odds, I'll be playing that myself. What's going on? Os the Boss? We got to get some matchups posted on a Hard Rock Bet. It's been frustrating for us Florida folks the last day or so, huh? He said Xander is so lost on these greens. Maybe he figures it out this weekend. Yeah, I'd put money on him figuring it out. He's a great putter. It's pretty good on Bermuda grass too. And we know that short game around the green and putting is extremely volatile. So I won't worry about it too much, my man. We'll see what happens though. What's going on, Goku? Welcome on in. Glad to have you in here late, better than never. And appreciate you, Noah. Says, have a great night, Luke. Let's have a weekend. Amen to that. My cup's out of whiskey. We're at the end of the live stream here, so we're going to go ahead and cut it off now. Best of luck with everything that you guys are going with. I've got to do some packing. I've got to set an early alarm so we can get up there for that golf course. But we'll see if we can get a sweat going over the next day or so. But for the rest of the content that I'm posting, make sure to check it out on my Patreon page. DFS sheet can be found via the Golf DFS tier. All my bets, all the research tools for betting, like the averages, can be found via the Golf Prop and betting tier. But that's all I've got, guys. Smash that like button, subscribe so you guys don't miss our round 4 live stream. And tomorrow night, even though I will be on the road, we'll be going live again. It'll be from a hotel room, so not quite the same setup that we have here. To be determined on the time, so stay tuned with that. But we'll be giving you some of the information, some of the boots on the ground info that we saw from the golf course to make it an even better Sunday. And based on what happened last week with us having that smash Sunday, the come from behind outright cash and pretty much cashing all the bets that we placed for Sunday as well. Let's see if it can be that good luck charm, us getting there in person. But that's all, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night.